All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is our third Ask Us series. So this is a series of webinars we've been doing where we're asking an archivist today. We've asked a collector about some textiles, and then we did ask a curator as our first one to talk about some different museum practices. So we do have some other upcoming Zooms. Before we get started, I'll just talk about those real briefly. We have another Zoom webinar on the 21st of this month. It's a beginning genealogy one, and you can register for that on our webpage. You can register for any of our Zoom events if you go to yorkhistorycenter.org, and then you go to the events tab, and you'll see some of our programs and webinars. We also are going to have our second Saturday in December. It's December 12th. That one will also be on Zoom, and it's a really neat presentation about women to the rescue, about after the Battle of Gettysburg, some women, female nurses that helped. So that's another one that's coming up. If you like these programs, please consider supporting us through membership. And as far as a way you can communicate with us, you can submit questions in the Zoom chat. And after a little bit, I'll kind of walk behind the camera so I can see those questions coming in. And we'll also be looking at Facebook. If we don't see your Facebook ones right away, we'll try to get to you after this presentation as well, but we'll try to monitor both of those. So I'm gonna turn things over to Nicole, let her introduce herself. I guess I forgot myself too. I'm Rachel Warner, I'm our Director of Collections, and Nicole, go ahead and tell us who you are.
Thank you. I'm Nicole Smith, Director of Library and Archives here at the History Center.
And can you tell us, where we're at here in the History Center and a little bit about the Library and Archives collections?
Sure. Not that many people get to see this part of the History Center. This is one of our closed storage archives rooms. We have quite a large archives here, actually. Close to 40,000 books, hundreds of thousands of photographs, and hundreds of thousands of documents of all kinds here at the History Center.
Great. Awesome. So today we're talking about books, manuscripts, and photographs. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, what are just some basics about caring for those three types of objects that's kind of universal to all three?
Sure. There's a lot that you can do at home to care for, these items if you have them at home. We talk about what we call agents of deterioration, which is a lot to do with the environment that things are in. Some of the biggies are heat, humidity, light, dirt, and pests, bugs, yeah. So these are all things you want to avoid when taking care of antiques and archives.
Okay. Do you have any no-nos that you would kind of tell people?
Sure.
Things you see a lot that maybe they do?
Sure. Yes, we're going to show you some interesting things you can do, products you can buy, but there are definitely things you do not want to do if you're looking to preserve documents or photographs. One of the biggest ones is lamination. Here's an example of I'll walk up to the camera here, of a document that's been laminated. You can also see that at one time it had a metal paper clip at the top that got rusty. Lamination will dissolve your document over time, so it's not a good long-term solution. Anything metal, such as paper clips, staples, will rust, and definitely try to avoid rubber bands and Scotch tape, both of which will get icky over time and fall apart, as well as leave stains on your photographs and documents.
All right. Well, I'm going to step behind the camera so I can kind of zoom in on some things that you have to show us. And we can talk a little bit about books.
Okay.
So what are some of the types of special care that books in particular need?
Sure. Books need care too, as well as original documents and photos. Over here, we have an example of a very early German Bible that's from our collection here. You can see it has a leather cover. It's not in the best condition, but we're keeping it as best we can. Again, if you try to keep your items in a comfortable environment, not too hot, not too cold, not real humid, definitely avoid attics or damp basements. Another thing here is we have it on a book cradle. You don't necessarily need a book cradle at home, but it's always good to be careful when opening an old book that you don't open it too wide because you could break the binding. Another tip is we often use, over here we have fabric tape, which we can use either with paper or without to wrap the book like a present, like a ribbon. And that helps keep the book together, especially if there are any loose pages that might fall out over time. So those are just some things we do here at the History Center that you could do at home.
Sure. I'm going to show them right behind Nicole is actually a view into our closed stacks. And you can kind of see all kinds of books that are wrapped that same way. That's how we care for our different books here in the History Center's collection.
And this is an example over here of the wrapping paper that we have. We talk a lot about acid-free or archival products. These are things you can purchase online to help preserve your items. It's really important that you get acid-free or archival products. And we'll talk more about that, but one thing to look out for is wood and old paper are very acidic. So your acid-free papers and boxes and envelopes and things will protect your item from a wood shelf or a wooden box or other papers that are acidic.
So do you want to talk about manuscripts a little bit? How many did you say again? I feel like you gave me a
Sure.
number.
It's difficult to say just how many manuscripts we have in the History Center. Hundreds of thousands is what I usually tell people, because that includes any papers, documents, maps, anything two-dimensional that isn't a bound book. And that's a lot of things.
So that's kind of like when you say manuscripts, it's any paper document basically is what we consider a manuscript. It's
Yes.
not bound in a book. So what are some of the best ways to store and care for manuscripts?
Sure. I'm going to walk over here and can you see this box here, Rachel?
Yep.
Okay. This is an example of an acid-free box that you can order from online. And we keep a lot of our manuscript collections in boxes like these. Within the box, we have acid-free folders, which you can keep documents in. You can also purchase acid-free envelopes, which are great for smaller documents and photographs. Another option, I did bring out a smaller box here of some postcards, just to show you. You can there's a certain type of plastic that's also acid-free. It's called polypropylene. And you can store things like postcards and small documents in sleeves like this. And that's how we store our postcard collection and things like currency.
Great. So we can go ahead and move to photographs then. I feel like that's probably something a lot of families especially have, or a lot of scrapbooks and photographs. So what are some things we should watch out for with photographs?
Sure. And then I'm just going to move a couple things here to make a little space. So photographs are similar in the way you want to care for them. Can you see the book here?
Yeah.
The photo album. This is an older photo album that some of you might have photo albums like this in your home. This would actually belong to General Jacob Devers, and all of his photo albums are in this black paper. Sometimes the photos are actually pasted on. It's always best, if you can, to take your photos out of an album and put them into something like acid-free folders, envelopes, or the polypropylene sleeves. But if you want to preserve the album intact, what we do is we put tissue paper or copy paper, which is acid-free as well, in between the pages to try to make a barrier between the photograph and the black acidic paper. Another option are traditional binders, 3-ring binders. Here we have a slide collection. These are polypropylene sleeves. You can get them online, Amazon or Staples, for slides and for prints, and they are also acid-free and a good way to store photographs as well at home.
So that's really the key, is that make sure they're looking for acid-free materials or inert plastics, and nothing that's gonna off-gas or potentially put more acid into the area where the photos are.
Yeah, it's good to be thinking, what kind of barrier can you make between your antique item and the acidic world around it?
Yeah.
Some people ask about framing documents and things, and that's okay too, but you want it to be done by a professional, because a professional framer will use acid-free mat boards and products that will keep it preserved. You also want to be careful not to hang pictures of any kind in the light. UV light will fade all documents and photographs over time. You can also get UV filtered glass for professional framing. Another quick thing I wanted to mention when working with books and manuscripts is some people wear gloves. People often ask whether or not to wear gloves. Many archives suggest that you do not wear gloves, that you have clean hands and dry hands. Gloves, especially cotton ones, will tear delicate paper around the edges. So that's why you don't see me wearing gloves today.
Yeah, that's kind of a big difference between our collections, where a lot of three-dimensional objects we are wearing gloves with because it's okay to handle them that way. But in the archives, it's actually better to not have those gloves on.
As long as your hands are clean, because your hands do have oils in them that will damage things over time. Another thing I wanted to mention with photographs is I had said it's best to take your photos out of albums, especially the sticky kind. I mean, there's all kinds of albums that people have used over time that will damage your photos eventually. But please be sure to identify your photos well. That's one of the best things you can do to preserve them is, if you can, write who they are, when it was taken on the back, or at least on your envelope or folder, so that that won't get lost over time.
Definitely. I know my family has a lot of photos that we wish we would have asked someone while they were still with us who this person was, because we're not sure anymore who that person might have been.
Yeah.
So we do have one question that came in that's related to the photographs, and it was, can you put more than one document or photo back to back in an acid-free envelope or sleeve?
You can. I know that those products can get expensive. One thing you can do that would help is to put a piece of copy paper or acid-free tissue in between them. That way they're not touching each other. That would preserve them a little bit better.
Yep. Yeah, it makes a buffer. Oh, we got another question. What writing instrument should be used on the back of photos?
Yes, that's a tricky one. We prefer pencil. because we operate on a do no harm basis for the most part in the archives, because that can be erased. They do make good pens, identification pens for art and photographs that you can buy at art stores. And it's really, in my mind, it's better to have that information there, and even if you have to do it in a permanent with a pen.
Sure. Yeah, we do pencils because we're trying to do things that are reversible. So if the information maybe is wrong or something,
Yes,
we could,
yes.
or if something changes, it's easier to update it or remove those marks.
So it does get a little tricky when, depending on the back of your photograph, if you're able to use pencil. So pencil's preferred. Second would be some kind of nice permanent pen that isn't going to bleed or smudge off.
And they do make them with acid-free inks. So
They do,
yeah,
yes.
if you would look for one with acid-free archival ink. Could you tell us a little bit about scanning and digitizing your collections?
Sure, sure. Yes, scanning, digitizing, that's a wonderful way to preserve your photographs. We try to do that here as much as we can. It does, it lets you share a lot easier with family and friends. And we do it so you don't have to handle the originals as much. You can just share the digital copy. We do offer some scanning services here and could advise on scanning. And when you're talking about preserving your photographs, another thing to think about is eventually donating them to the History Center or in other archives so that they can be preserved for generations. If anyone would like advice on scan settings and that sort of thing, please just give us a call. But yeah, scanning and digitizing is a really important way to go these days to preserve what you have.
Yeah, it definitely makes it very shareable too with your relatives and your family, so that you can share those copies with people, and it's a great way to preserve it. So do you want to talk about resources a little bit?
Sure, sure. Now your acid-free products you can buy online. You could Google acid-free or archival. There are a couple companies that specialize in these things. One of them is Gaylord. It's Gaylord. And another one is called Hollinger, which is Hollinger. These are both companies with websites that have a great variety of acid-free papers, tissues, boxes, and they do have preservation kits for home history collections now. It's one of their new things. Some of these items, like the slide and photo sleeves, you can get somewhere like Staples, but as long as they're marked, physically marked, archival or acid-free.
Yeah, I've noticed, we've talked about that in some of the other presentations we've done with Gaylord and I think Hollinger and Talus. These used to be companies that were mainly museum suppliers. So, but Gaylord especially, and we're not an affiliate or anything of theirs, but they have done a really great job lately of putting a lot of information on their website. So, about preserving photographs, preserving manuscripts, different things. And then they have material kits, so you can kind of get a sampling of different things that you might need as far as boxes or acid-free tissue paper, that sort of thing. So let me look here. Is there anything else you thought of you wanted to mention?
That was pretty much everything I had prepared. And you're always welcome to call us here at the library. Either call Nicole or Adam or Brian, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions. All of our information's on the website.
So I'm just checking for any questions. We did answer a few on Zoom, but if you think of anything else, we'll wait a little while here if you have some questions. And I'll also check on our Facebook too.
And I guess I could mention that the History Center does take donations of family history, any original and scans, either or. Any kind of photographs, documents related to family or community history or business history from York County.
So we do have one more question. It's from Kathy, and she said, what is your opinion of newer scrapbook trends? So.
Sure. Well, I know scrapbooking was a pretty big deal recently. I don't have a strong opinion on it. It seems like you can get acid-free and archival products for scrapbooking. I mean, I've made scrapbooks myself. Still, for your older pictures, for permanent, something you want to keep forever, I would consider investing in some good archival boxes and folders to keep things on a more permanent basis.
Yeah, my mom is a scrapbooker, and she's very good about finding the acid-free papers and materials and adhesives even. But I've talked to her about it and said, well, that's a copy, right? Like, that's not your only version of that photo. Like, that's a copy of it. So that's kind of what we're doing, is she's keeping, a regular copy of that photo and then making another reprint to use in her scrapbooks. So.
That's an excellent idea. You have an original photo that you keep out of sight, away from elements, and then you have a copy that you can have for display and share.
Yeah, then you have a little bit of artistic license maybe with that photo.
Absolutely.
I know the scrapbookers that I know really like to, cut things out of the background and do a lot of embellishments around it. So it's
Yes.
a different world than what we live in, that's for sure.
I see. Well, thank you.
Let me look here if there's any other questions. Lynn says, thank you so much. She says she's starting to go through your family documents and photos, so this was a big help. She did ask, is glassine acid-free?
Glassine, I'm not sure offhand.
Yeah, that's an older material type that really isn't used quite as much anymore.
I'd be a little nervous about something like that, but yeah, I would definitely want to look that up before using it.
Yeah, I think it's made with a wax. It's almost like a wax paper.
Yeah.
It may be okay, but yeah, we have to look it up, and to be sure, you could always interleaf with acid-free tissue if you have.
Yeah, I would be a little concerned about that. And there are real experts out there. The Northeastern Document Center, there's a Conservation Center in Philadelphia that, when we don't know every answer, we call them and get their opinion.
Lynn said, she said Staples listed as acid-free. So it's very likely it is. I would say be careful with like the real big box companies. I would make sure like a Gaylord or a Hollinger has it listed as acid-free too. Because sometimes I feel like even Amazon's like that sometimes, where you have to be careful about trusting if the materials really are acid-free.
Yeah, it's true.
We have one other question. This is from Laura, and she said, is it okay to store old photographs in an archival scrapbook from Gaylord rather than the envelopes?
Yes. Yes. Archival scrapbooks are fine. It's a preference. Sleeves are good because then you don't have to handle them. If you can do it in a way that you don't have to put adhesive on the back and paste it into something, that would be better. But if you can use maybe the plastic corners, the acid-free plastic corners, something like that. But yeah, those are fine too.
Yeah, we use those photo corners even with mounting exhibits and things, the acid-free ones. And one thing I've learned, though, you do have to be careful because sometimes if you're trying to get it into too tight of one or small one, it can damage your corners. But generally, they're really good, and it's still better than an adhesive.
Yeah, even an acid-free adhesive. Someday you might want to take that picture out of that, and it might damage it if you try to do that.
Let's see what else is here. You answered that one.
Thanks for all the great questions, everyone.
Yeah, we did get, thank you everybody that was able to join us here. I'm gonna look on Facebook, see if there's anything there. Rick and Frida said, great presentation. And Nat Fillmore, she said, what is the best way to store old, large deeds?
Yes, well, how we do it is we have larger acid-free boxes. I don't really have one handy unless you can pan around a little bit to hear.
There's some, and our flat files.
But if you have such a thing as architectural files, but we have large acid-free boxes from those same companies, and then we separate them with folders or tissue paper to keep them safe. Yeah. Okay. Here's an example of a acid-free folder that we could use for a deed. But they come in different styles, and then you can buy them to fit the size of whatever box that you order. You can get custom-made boxes
as well. Yeah, the key is really just to keep it flat, not leave things folded, because it's the same as with like our textile collection. Things will eventually split on that fold after time. So
yes, good point. Yeah, you don't want to keep things folded. If at all possible, unfolding large documents and storing them flat. It's not always possible in one's house, but if you can, that would be best.
Lynn asked about rolling. Is rolling okay?
It can be. We do roll very large things here. You can even buy map style boxes and rolls from the acid-free archival companies. If you're going to roll something, it should be either on an acid-free tube, or the tube can be wrapped in a barrier paper and you can roll it on that.
Yeah, that's a trick we use because acid-free tubes can be really, really expensive. So you can get a tube that's, like for something like us with a quilt, when it's something huge, we can actually get them from carpet companies, the carpet rolls, but you can't use just that tube. We do a bunch of layers of acid-free, really thick acid-free paper. So then there's that buffer between the tube and eventually the quilt.
So that's doable if your paper will naturally roll and won't be damaged that way. You can also use the fabric tape to tie it and keep it from unrolling.
Yeah, the thing that we do with, not to keep going back to textiles, but in a way they're kind of similar.
Textiles are similar.
A large piece of paper that you roll too. We always use like a sheet of paper, of tissue paper down on the surface first, then layer the object, and then usually put another layer of tissue and then roll it. So you kind of get like buffer all around it, and you're really giving it some like cushion, and
Yeah.
extra protection.
Yeah. Yeah. Buffering paper is a great idea for rolling any large documents or even photographs.
Lynn said, thank you very much. She said she'll see us at the genealogy webinar. So long from
Okay.
Chicago. Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you everyone for all these great questions. Just gonna check here a little bit more, make sure I didn't miss anybody. All right, I think that's it. I think we have everybody. So we'll wrap up here. And like Nicole mentioned, you know, feel free that you can always send us an email. Either of us, you can find our contact information on the website as well. Rachel Warner, it's rwarner@yorkhistorycenter.org. Nicole's is nsmith@yorkhistorycenter.org. And yeah, thank you all for your questions. If you like our programs, please consider joining and becoming a member of the History Center. That helps support us and helps us keep doing these programs. And definitely, I know some of you are joining us from Facebook, but if you aren't, consider liking our page. Then you'll get notifications when we do other presentations and other events. And if you're not interested in Facebook, another way you can keep in touch with us is just by signing up for our e-blasts. And that is on the bottom of our webpage. You can put in your email address and then you'll get an email that gives you notifications about programs like these. So thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nicole.